There comes a moment, quiet, invisible, yet utterly life-altering, when the empath stops smiling to survive. They stop apologizing for existing, stop shape-shifting to keep the peace, stop betraying their own soul in the name of being good. And in that moment, something ancient breaks open. Carl Jung called it the return of the self, the reclamation of all the pieces you gave away just to be loved. This is not just psychological. It's energetic. It's spiritual. It's what happens when the empath, once consumed by the emotions of others, turns inward and sees the truth. The dark side of people-pleasing isn't just exhaustion, it's identity loss. And the cost, your essence, your voice, your power. In this video, you'll journey through the shadows Jung warned us about, the patterns of martyrdom, the masks we wear, the tyrants within. You'll witness what truly happens when an empath awakens, not just emotionally, but cosmically. Because the moment you stop betraying yourself to be liked is the moment you become unstoppable. At first glance, the act of pleasing others feels noble, even divine. The empath grows up believing their role is to keep the peace, smooth the edges, and absorb the chaos so others don't have to. But Carl Jung would warn, when kindness becomes compulsion, when harmony becomes a prison, the soul begins to fracture. What's masked as compassion is often a strategy for survival, born in environments where love was conditional and silence was safer than truth. Empaths often internalize a dangerous equation. If they're happy, I'm safe. This unconscious contract wires the nervous system to seek external validation at the cost of inner alignment. Slowly, a person becomes a mirror for other people's needs, reflecting back approval, warmth, or care, while burying their own authenticity. This is not selflessness. This is energetic martyrdom. Jung might call it a sacrifice of the self to the persona, the mask we wear to survive a world that misunderstands depth. But this comes with a hidden toll. Over time, the empath loses the ability to discern where they end and others begin. Boundaries blur. The body grows tense, the heart becomes tired, and somewhere deep in the subconscious, resentment brews, not just toward others, but toward the part of themselves that keeps complying, even when it hurts. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." For empaths, this means becoming aware of the why behind their overgiving. People-pleasing is often the ego's way of preventing abandonment. It's not love, it's fear wearing a smile. And the moment the empath realizes this, the illusion begins to break. They see that their niceness has been a survival instinct, a form of manipulation even, crafted to avoid rejection, conflict, or being seen as selfish. This realization stings, but it's also the first crack in the false self, the beginning of liberation. Because real kindness doesn't betray the self. Real compassion includes you. And when the empath stops performing and starts feeling, when they listen to the quiet truth within, a new kind of power is born. One rooted not in approval, but in authenticity, not in safety, but in sovereignty. Carl Jung believed that every human being walks with a shadow, the unseen self, made up of everything the ego refuses to acknowledge. For most people, that shadow lurks quietly in the unconscious. But for the empath, the dynamic becomes far more complex. Empaths, by nature, are attuned to the emotional energy of others. Yet ironically, this same sensitivity can cause them to become repositories for the shadows of those around them, while remaining blind to their own. This happens subtly, almost invisibly. Empaths often absorb anger, shame, guilt, and despair from others, believing it's their responsibility to transmute it. They become emotional alchemists, trying to turn lead into light. But in doing so, they often bypass their own emotional pain. Jung would say, this is the ultimate projection. We cast the darkest parts of ourselves onto the world, only to take on the burden of healing what isn't ours to carry. And for the empath, this cycle becomes exhausting. The tragedy here is quiet but profound. Because while the empath helps others face their inner wounds, they avoid facing their own. They become spiritually fragmented, hollowed out by the illusion that being good means being empty. Jung taught that what we reject within ourselves gains power in the dark. The unexpressed rage, the unspoken truth, the forbidden desire to be selfish, loud, or unapologetic. These become the shadow the empath must eventually confront. This isn't a call to harden or to abandon compassion. It's a call to integration. Jung's path was never about destroying the shadow, but about making peace with it. And for the empath, this means learning to say, that darkness isn't mine. It means letting others own their emotions without taking responsibility for fixing them. It means standing in the mirror and asking, what am I avoiding by focusing on everyone else? When the empath begins this journey inward, something powerful awakens. The energy that once went into pleasing and absorbing starts flowing towards self-recognition. Boundaries form, voice strengthens. The shadow, once feared, becomes a wellspring of insight and creative power. And in that moment, the empath begins not just to feel, but to see. Not just to heal others, but to become whole. Carl Jung once wrote about the archetype of the wounded healer, the idea that many healers are drawn to their path not through enlightenment, but through their own unresolved pain. For empaths, this archetype lives deep in the bones. Most didn't choose to become sensitive. Their sensitivity was forged in environments where emotional hypervigilance kept them safe. They learned to read the room, to regulate others' emotions, and to anticipate chaos before it erupted. In essence, empathy became armor. But what happens when your healing instinct is really just a coping mechanism dressed up as love? This is the secret Jung tried to illuminate, that unprocessed wounds often masquerade as gifts. The empath, seeking to rescue others, is often trying to rescue the child within themselves who was once ignored, silenced, or used for emotional labor. Their gift is real, but it's tangled in a past that still echoes through their nervous system. This creates a subtle but dangerous dynamic. Helping becomes addictive. The empath feels valuable only when they're needed. They become entangled in relationships where their worth is measured by how much they give, fix, or sacrifice. Jung would say this is a shadow of the ego, a false sense of self rooted in being the savior. And the tragedy is that while they're busy mending others, no one is holding space for them. To truly heal, the empath must interrupt this cycle. They must begin to ask the uncomfortable questions. Who would I be if I wasn't saving anyone? What pain have I buried beneath my desire to be helpful? These questions don't lead to immediate answers. They lead to deeper layers of self-awareness. And this is where the transformation begins, not in doing more, but in being seen, fully, vulnerably, without performing strength. When the wounded healer stops trying to heal others first, they finally turn their light inward. They see that their sensitivity was never a flaw, but it was never meant to be currency either. It was meant to be honored, protected, and directed with consciousness. From this place, empathy becomes power. Boundaries become sacred. And the healing that once came from pain now comes from wholeness. Carl Jung taught that our perception of others is often a reflection of unacknowledged parts of ourselves. Empaths, with their mirror-like nature, are especially vulnerable to this phenomenon. They become emotional chameleons, blending into the energy of whoever they're with, subconsciously adapting their frequency to keep others comfortable. But in doing so, they often wear masks that reflect the needs of the room, not the truth of their soul. It starts innocently. The empath feels someone's sadness and responds with comfort. They sense tension and immediately shift to diffuse it. Over time, these reactions become identity. I'm the one who makes others feel better. But this identity isn't rooted in who they are. It's rooted in who others need them to be, and that's the beginning of a slow erasure. Jung called this the tyranny of the persona, the social mask we wear to survive. And for empaths, this mask can become suffocating. The danger is subtle but corrosive, because the empath doesn't just lose their boundaries, they lose their inner compass. They begin to feel what others feel more strongly than they feel their own desires, anger, or joy. Their nervous system becomes attuned to the external, disconnected from the internal. And over time, the question, "What do I feel?" becomes a foreign one, buried beneath layers of emotional mirroring and self-abandonment. But there is a way back. Jung believed in the power of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the unconscious with the conscious self. For the empath, this means peeling off the masks. It means standing still in solitude long enough to ask, "Who am I?" when no one else is feeling anything around me. That question opens a portal, one that leads from mimicry to authenticity, from performance to presence. And here's the great paradox. When the empath stops being everything for everyone, they become something far more powerful, real. No longer diluted by the needs of others, their energy becomes clear. Their presence becomes magnetic, not because they mirror, but because they radiate. The journey from mirrors and masks to soul and truth is the empath's most sacred path. And on the other side of it is freedom. Carl Jung spoke often about the alchemical dance between opposites, light and shadow, conscious and unconscious. Nowhere is this more evident than in the recurring entanglement between empaths and narcissists. It's a dynamic that seems fated, karmic, even magnetic. But under Jungian insight, it reveals itself as a feedback loop, one where both parties are reflecting hidden parts of each other's psyches in an unconscious exchange of energy, trauma, and unmet needs. The empath is drawn to the narcissist's certainty. Their confidence, charm, or power feels like safety, a gravitational pull that whispers, "You'll finally be seen." Meanwhile, the narcissist is drawn to the empath's softness, openness, and willingness to serve. But beneath these surface traits lies a deeper codependency. The empath unconsciously wants to heal the narcissist's wound, not realizing it mirrors their own wound, the need to be needed in order to feel worthy. Jung would call this a projection trap. The narcissist projects their denied vulnerability onto the empath. The empath projects their denied assertiveness onto the narcissist. Both are relating not from essence, but from shadow. And as the relationship deepens, the empath begins to feel drained, confused, even gaslit. Why? Because they're stuck in the role of healer, and the moment they stop playing it, the narcissist retaliates or withdraws. It becomes a loop of abandonment and overgiving, over and over. Breaking this loop requires deep inner work. The empath must begin to reclaim their authority, not over the narcissist, but over themselves. They must recognize that love does not mean fixing, that kindness without boundaries is self-betrayal. Jung taught that the path to wholeness involves reclaiming our projections and withdrawing our unconscious energy from others. For the empath, this means no longer being addicted to potential, no longer confusing pain with depth, no longer mistaking control for intimacy. When the loop is broken, clarity returns. The empath steps out of the role of energetic caregiver and into the seat of conscious creator. They see that the real lesson wasn't about the narcissist at all. It was about the part of themselves that believed they had to earn love. And in that realization, a sacred fire ignites, the power to choose peace over patterns, to choose self-respect over familiar suffering, to choose truth, even if it means walking away. For many empaths, the most powerful oppressor is not outside of them, it lives within. Carl Jung referred to this inner critic as a complex, a fragmented part of the psyche formed in response to early wounds, often acting as an internalized parent, teacher, or cultural voice. For the empath, this voice becomes an invisible tyrant, one that demands silence, compliance, and perfection. It whispers, "Don't make waves, don't ask for too much, stay useful, stay small." This voice is so familiar, it often goes unnoticed. It masquerades as conscience, as humility, even as spiritual wisdom. But in truth, it is a trauma echo, the residue of childhood dynamics where being good was the only way to feel safe. And because empaths are energetically porous, they absorb these rules not just mentally, but somatically. The body tenses, the throat tightens, the authentic self becomes imprisoned under the weight of unconscious obedience. Jung warned that these inner structures must be brought to light, not destroyed, but integrated. The empath must begin to notice when their choices are dictated by fear rather than truth. Are they helping because it feels aligned, or because they're afraid of being seen as selfish, difficult, or unlovable? These questions pierce the illusion of virtue, revealing that people-pleasing is often just another name for self-erasure. To face the inner tyrant is to reclaim inner authority. It means recognizing that the voice of shame is not the voice of truth, that guilt is not always a moral compass. Sometimes it's a program designed to keep you from evolving. Jung's process of individuation teaches that the true self must wrestle with the shadow to become whole. And for the empath, this battle often takes place at the threshold of saying no for the first time. But here's the alchemy. Every time the empath defies the tyrant, their nervous system recalibrates. Their energy shifts. Their light, once dimmed to keep others comfortable, begins to shine unfiltered, and in that moment, they realize something profound. They were never too much. They were just too real for a world addicted to masks. And the voice that once kept them small now becomes a reminder of how far they've come. The moment an empath decides to stop performing, to stop adjusting, appeasing, or contorting for the comfort of others, something ancient stirs within them. Carl Jung called this the return of the self, the emergence of one's true nature after years of exile. It's not loud or dramatic, it's subtle. It begins with a single whisper. This is not who I am. And from that whisper, a revolution begins. One that no longer revolves around the expectations of others. Empaths often live disconnected from their core essence because they were conditioned to keep others emotionally safe. But the price of that safety was authenticity. Now, as they awaken, they begin to reclaim the parts they once disowned, the messy parts, the bold parts, the parts that desire, grieve, rage, and speak truth. Jung believed individuation was not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. And wholeness demands the integration of all we are, not just the light, but the shadow too. This awakening is not comfortable. It often brings waves of guilt, fear, and grief. The empath may feel selfish for setting boundaries, arrogant for speaking their truth, disloyal for walking away from one-sided dynamics. But these emotions are not indicators of wrongness. They are withdrawal symptoms from an identity rooted in self-neglect. Every time the empath chooses themselves, they chip away at the illusion that love must be earned through sacrifice. With each step into authenticity, their frequency changes. They begin to attract different conversations, different relationships, even different timelines. Why? Because they're no longer emitting the energy of save me or use me. They're broadcasting sovereignty. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And for the empath, that privilege comes after the courageous choice to stop being who the world taught them to be. Eventually, the empath no longer fears being misunderstood. They no longer feel responsible for managing other people's emotional landscapes. They simply stand, unapologetically, in their truth. And in that stance, they discover a new kind of power, Not the power to control others, but the power to be fully, vibrantly, radically themselves. And nothing is more magnetic or more dangerous to illusion than that. Carl Jung believed that wholeness is not found by chasing the light, but by descending into the darkness and bringing light there. For the empath, this is the sacred work, to reclaim the energy they've scattered in the name of safety, to retrieve the fragments they've hidden beneath smiles and silence, and to finally become an integrated being, no longer fractured, no longer defined by their wounds, but whole, embodied and awake. Shadow work, at its core, is the practice of loving what was once unloved, especially within ourselves. The empath, often so adept at holding space for others, must now hold space for their own suppressed anger, unmet needs, unspoken desires, and unexpressed truth. This is not weakness. This is initiation. Because true spiritual strength does not come from avoiding discomfort, it comes from alchemizing it. As the empath integrates, something powerful happens. Their energy becomes coherent. No longer leaking through people-pleasing, guilt, or hypervigilance, it condenses into clarity and purpose. Their aura, once fogged by others' emotions, begins to crystallize. They start to feel themselves again, not as an idea, but as a force. Jung called this the emergence of the self, the union of all opposites within. It is the birth of spiritual maturity. This new empath doesn't shrink to fit into old containers. They don't perform compassion, they embody it, fiercely and unapologetically. They don't give from depletion, they give from overflow. And their boundaries are not walls, but thresholds, sacred invitations into a relationship of mutual respect. People feel it, energy shifts around them. They are no longer available for manipulation, martyrdom, or emotional enslavement. In this state, the empath becomes what they were always meant to be. Not a sponge, but a beacon. Not a rescuer, but a sovereign soul. Not a fractured healer, but a whole human, pulsing with presence, purpose, and power. This is the integrated empath, and their presence is a quiet revolution, a living transmission of what it means to be fully alive and fully free. Somewhere along the way, the empath was taught that love meant disappearing, that kindness meant silence, that being spiritual meant being small. But that was never the truth, only a spell cast by a world terrified of deep feeling and radical authenticity. Carl Jung knew the gold is in the shadow. And for the empath, that gold is found not in pleasing others, but in remembering themselves, remembering their edges, their voice, their sacred no, their unapologetic yes, their full spectrum humanity, light and dark, gentle and fierce, soft and sovereign. This is not the end of a healing journey, it's the beginning of embodiment, of no longer asking for permission to exist, of walking into rooms as your whole self, unmasked and unshaken. And when you do that, you don't just heal, you initiate. You awaken others simply by being real. If this message stirred something in your soul, it means you're ready to unlearn the old roles, ready to reclaim the frequency of your truth. So take a breath, dear empath, and rise. If this resonated with you, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the Cosmic Awakening channel, where your soul is always welcome to remember who it truly is.